Imagine walking into a courtroom so tense it feels like the air itself could break. A billionaire strolls in, confident, untouchable. And when the judge enters, he refuses to stand. What happens next will leave you stunned. The moment he stepped through the courtroom doors, the air shifted. People had gathered to watch justice play out, but instead, they were met with the kind of arrogance that makes your blood run hot. Nathaniel Cross wasn't an ordinary man on trial. He was a billionaire. Not the quiet kind who built fortunes in silence, but the flashy kind who lived on magazine covers and Instagram feeds. He owned sprawling estates in Beverly Hills and Manhattan, yachts longer than most homes, and a jet fleet that made airlines jealous. When people spoke his name, it was with equal parts awe and resentment. On this day, though, he wasn't walking into a gala or a business deal. He was walking into a federal courtroom, accused of orchestrating one of the largest financial scams in the country's history. The benches were packed with victims, journalists, and curious onlookers. Every eye turned when Nathaniel entered. He wore a charcoal Italian suit that probably cost more than some families made in a year. His salt and pepper hair was slicked back to perfection, shining beneath the fluorescent lights. And that smile, the one he always wore on red carpets, stretched across his face as though this entire trial were an elaborate show staged for his benefit. He didn't look like a man fighting for his freedom. He looked like a man convinced he'd already won. Then the courtroom shifted again. The bailiff announced the entrance of Judge Rebecca Owens, a woman known across the state for her razor-sharp legal mind and reputation for impartial justice. She was respected, even feared, for her ability to cut through excuses and expose truth like a surgeon with a scalpel. "All rise," the bailiff commanded, and the entire room obeyed except Nathaniel Cross. He stayed seated, legs crossed, idly flipping through a notepad as if the most powerful person in the room was beneath his notice. Gasps rippled through the benches. His lawyer leaned in, whispering frantically for him to stand, but Nathaniel waved him off with a lazy flick of his wrist. His smirk deepened, daring the judge to react. Judge Owens paused at the bench, her eyes locking on Nathaniel. Her expression remained calm, her face betraying nothing, but the silence was deafening. Every second stretched longer, the tension pressing on the crowd like weight on their chests. Finally, she spoke. "You may be seated," she said, her voice steady and controlled. Everyone else sat down. Nathaniel didn't move because he'd never stood. The arrogance was complete. He wasn't just refusing to respect the court. He was sending a message. "I am bigger than this system. These people don't matter. I am untouchable." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Victims in the benches clenched their fists. Reporters scribbled furiously, and whispers grew into a low hum. How could he do this? How could anyone think they were so far above the law? Judge Owens kept her composure, but the atmosphere in that courtroom had changed. Everyone could feel it. This trial wasn't going to be business as usual. Nathaniel Cross believed money could buy silence, delay, even freedom. But what he didn't yet understand was that this time, he wasn't facing a system that bent for him. He was facing a judge who had spent her entire career proving that justice, real justice, could not be bought. And that refusal to stand? It was only the beginning of his fall. The courtroom was silent, but not empty of sound. It pulsed with quiet pain, the kind that comes when ordinary people are forced to relive extraordinary loss. And each voice that rose against Nathaniel Cross only deepened the weight of the room. The first to take the stand was Angela Moreno, a widow in her 40s with tired eyes that had seen too much grief. She clutched a folded piece of paper in her trembling hands, but when she spoke, her voice cracked under the burden of her story. "I trusted him," she said, staring directly at Nathaniel. "I gave him everything I had left, my savings, my children's future, and he destroyed us." Angela described the day she lost her home. She had begged the bank not to foreclose, pleaded for more time, but the numbers didn't lie, and her children spent 2 weeks sleeping in a car parked behind a gas station. Her youngest daughter still woke up crying in the middle of the night, asking if they'd lose their car too. The courtroom shifted, many unable to hold back tears. But Nathaniel? He didn't even glance at her. He leaned back in his chair, scrolling on his phone, as if her words were a dull lecture he'd heard before. Next came Robert Hayes, a retired firefighter who had spent 35 years running into burning buildings to save strangers. His savings, his pension, his sense of security for retirement gone, swallowed by Cross's schemes. "I put my life on the line every day," Robert's voice boomed, anger sharp in every syllable. "And this man," he pointed straight at Nathaniel, "burned my future to the ground without a second thought." His fists clenched as he spoke, knuckles white against the wood of the witness stand. The weight of his sacrifice, contrasted with the casual cruelty of Nathaniel's greed, struck like a hammer against the silence of the room. And still Nathaniel smirked. He whispered something to his lawyer and chuckled, the sound grating in the ears of every victim who had come seeking justice. Then came the moment that silenced even Nathaniel's mocking smile. The prosecution presented a series of emails, undeniable, damning, written in his own words. "Make the numbers look good," one read. "We need these suckers to sign on the dotted line." The words were poison in the air. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Angela's head dropped in disbelief. Robert clenched his jaw so tightly it looked painful. The prosecutor turned toward Nathaniel. "Mr. Cross, do you recognize this email?" His lawyer objected, but Judge Owens overruled. Nathaniel leaned into the microphone, his tone dripping with condescension. "Yes, I wrote it, but let's not pretend it means what you think it means. It's just business talk. You wouldn't understand." The room erupted in whispers, outrage echoing from every corner. Judge Owens struck her gavel like thunder, demanding order. But the damage was done. Nathaniel's arrogance was no longer just whispered about. It was undeniable, displayed in full view of the world. With every testimony, every document, every word Nathaniel dismissed, the weight of evidence pressed heavier on his shoulders. But instead of shrinking under it, he puffed his chest and laughed, as though the trial itself were a show written for his amusement. He didn't know it yet, but each smirk, each careless dismissal, was another nail hammered into the coffin of his empire. He walked into the courtroom on the final day as if he owned it. Cameras flashed, reporters jotted down every smirk, and Nathaniel Cross, billionaire, fraudster, and self-proclaimed untouchable, looked like a man who believed he'd already beaten the system. What happened next shattered that illusion forever. The atmosphere inside the courtroom was electric, almost unbearable in its intensity. The benches were full of victims. Mothers, fathers, retirees. Faces carved with both anger and hope. Reporters filled the back rows, pens poised, ready to capture the moment when justice would finally be delivered. Nathaniel lounged at the defense table, his suit as sharp as ever, his grin steady. He leaned toward the cameras, flashing that same confidence that had fooled investors for years. He didn't look like a man facing prison. He looked like a man stepping into a photo shoot. Judge Rebecca Owens entered, calm and collected, her black robe flowing as she approached the bench. The room fell silent. All eyes turned toward her, knowing this moment would decide Nathaniel's fate. "Mr. Cross," Judge Owens began, her voice deliberate and firm, "you have been found guilty on all counts: fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice." The words echoed like hammer blows. Nathaniel's grin didn't falter at first, but the victims leaned forward, listening intently. Judge Owens continued, her eyes locked on him. "You manipulated, deceived, and destroyed the lives of countless families for your own gain. You have shown no remorse. In this courtroom, you mocked the suffering of others, disrespected witnesses, and treated these proceedings as though they were beneath you." The gallery murmured in agreement. Angela Moreno clasped her hands tightly, tears streaming down her face. Robert Hayes, the retired firefighter, sat rigid, his jaw clenched as he waited. Then came the blow that no one expected. "Therefore," Judge Owens declared, her tone sharp as steel, "I sentence you to 25 years in federal prison, without the possibility of parole. In addition, your assets will be liquidated immediately to repay the victims of your crimes." Gasps erupted from the courtroom. Nathaniel's smirk finally broke. His face went pale, his jaw tightened, and for the first time he looked unsure. "This is outrageous," Nathaniel shouted, springing to his feet. "You can't do this to me. I'm Nathaniel Cross. I built empires. You can't treat me like a criminal." Bailiffs moved closer as Judge Owens raised her gavel. "Sit down, Mr. Cross. This is my courtroom. You will show respect." But he didn't stop. "I'll appeal. I'll ruin your career. You'll regret this." His voice cracked, more desperate than powerful, and the bailiffs stepped in, guiding him firmly toward the exit. His protests grew weaker with every step. The moment he was gone, the courtroom erupted. Not in chaos, but in applause. Victims stood, tears streaming, clapping in relief. For once, wealth and arrogance had not prevailed. Judge Owens softened her tone as she addressed the room. "Justice has been served. Let this remind us all that no one, not even the rich and powerful, is above the law." Angela wept quietly, whispering that her children finally had hope. Robert Hayes leaned back, tears welling in his eyes, whispering, "It's about time." Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed, and the story spread across the nation. Nathaniel Cross, the untouchable billionaire, had fallen, and Judge Rebecca Owens had proved that justice could not be bought. True justice isn't about money, power, or influence. It's about accountability. The story of Nathaniel Cross reminds us that arrogance and deceit may succeed for a time, but eventually truth rises and consequences follow. For adults and seniors, this lesson resonates deeply. Respect, honesty, and integrity will always outlast wealth built on lies. No matter our age or status, we each have a responsibility to live fairly and treat others with dignity. If you believe in stories that prove justice still matters, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell to support me.